Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Brother Hawk Bolden, and as usual, we're glad to bring you the things that the Lord have laid on our hearts to share with you all. We started off talking yesterday about loving your neighbor, and so we're going to point out a few things about that the Lord tells us, and we think that it is very important that people learn to do that, to love their neighbor. And to understand what the Lord means when he says that. Jesus said that they asked the Lord, what is the greatest commandment? And he said to love God, and basically, just in a nutshell, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Notice he didn't say love your brother as yourself. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. Not just your Christian brothers and sisters, but your neighbor. Now, when he talks about neighbor, he's not talking about your next door neighbor. He's talking about your fellow man. To have a genuine love for your fellow man. You see that? And so he said, on these hang all of the law and the prophets. Why? Because if you can't say, first of all, that you love God, but that you hate your neighbor who's made in a similitude of God, who you can see. You see that? And the truth be told, your love for God is displayed in how you treat mankind. Your passion for mankind. You have the heart of God. Now, if you belong to God, you should have the heart of God. And so let me explain what I mean. And God's love, if you're not walking in wisdom, you'll miss it all the time. You'll miss it all the time. People, it's amazing to me. People have their own mindset and they have their own idea about what true love is. They think true love, a lot of people think true love is letting someone get their way. Because for whatever reason, when they were growing up, maybe they didn't get their way and they feel like my parents didn't love me, or my parents really loved me when they bought me this or bought me that. And so they associate love with material things, with being able to have their own will. Even in marriage, people do that. I know my husband loved me because he does this, this, and this for me. But it transcends that. Why? Because Paul said, even though I give my body to be burned, if I have not charity or if I have not love, what does it profit me? In other words, you can give your life for somebody and still do it with the wrong motive. So let's not get caught up in what people are doing for you, and that's the love that they have for you. People can have the wrong motives. People can do all kind of things for you, and at the same time can parade what they're doing for you. And so then what's the real motive? To pat themselves on the back or let it be known. You see, people do things, and that's what Jesus meant when he said that this world, they'll deceive in the latter times, they'll deceive and get deceived. They're deceivers and they're being deceived. Why? Because people are out there doing things for people in the world, and the motive is wrong. And so, but if you're not careful, you can have the perception of, oh, this person really loved me because they've done this for me. But ultimately, you have to look at the motive and check the motive, and not just the motive of that person, but your motive when you do things for people. You see that? Because let's look at love. Let's look at God's love and his heart on the other end of it. The Bible makes it clear that Elijah prayed, and it didn't rain for 3.5 years. God answered his prayer to keep it from raining. Now, according to our definition of love, Elijah wouldn't have had any love. What kind of man prays that kind of prayer? To stop it from raining for 3.5 years. Animals died. People suffered. People died because of that. People went hungry because of that. People starved because of that famine. It didn't. One man prayed a prayer that stopped it from raining in the entire earth. Where was his love? It had to be love in there somewhere, because God answered that prayer. They weren't both having a bad day. and decided, well, we're just going to stop it from raining. Where was that love? I'll tell you where it was. Then this is what we're talking about, having the heart of God. The whole purpose was to turn the people of God back to him. They had backslidden and went serving after the gods that Jezebel had brought into the kingdom of Israel. And so the whole idea was to get people to turn their hearts back to God. What was it? I'll pray and show you just how much of this world system you can depend on. And when you find out that there's nothing to it, you'll be more than glad to turn your heart back to God. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to be honest with you, there have been times I've prayed that prayer, Lord, dry up their ground so that they'll turn to you. If it'll save their soul, that's what Paul meant in the 5th chapter of 1 Corinthians. Turn their flesh over to be buffeted by Satan. In other words, that is a part of the church. When people are not living right and they're not saved and they backslide in church, you turn them over to the devil. Don't pray for them like, Lord, continue to bless them. And Lord, they need to see a difference. Now, that's the love of God. Unfortunately, churches today are so full of love, they're just letting sinners go right to hell. That's not God's love. If God had that kind of love, he never would have made flesh for himself and dwelt among us in the flesh. You see that? Love, the Lord spoke to me years ago when somebody was challenging me on whether or not I should even be a pastor. And when I went to the Lord about it, the Lord spoke to me and said, love does not look at a person where they are. It looks at what they're going to become. Now that was on the positive side. God was saying, I look past your flaws because I see what you're going to be. That's where my eyesight is. It don't mean that he stopped dealing with us where we are right now. It just means he has hope for us. Now that's on the positive side. On the other side of it, love also sees where a person is going to spend an eternity, and it will do everything it can to stop that from taking place, even if that means making you uncomfortable right now. That's what love will do. Love sees the end. Love sees you on your way to hell. And so to stop that, I'm going to send you some trouble to make you call out to me. But you see, that's God love. Human love says, well, let's try to, comfort their flesh. And let's try to do this to, maybe they'll turn to God then. Let's accept them where they are. My wife and I, we've done quite a bit of traveling since we've been married. And I've seen on churches, in churches when we've traveled, everyone's welcome here. And every time I see that, that only means one thing to me. All you compromisers that ain't worried about being saved, y'all can come here. Just bring your tithes and offerings to the storehouse, and you can hold all kind of positions here. You live in a gay lifestyle, you're welcome to. Now, and the excuse that preachers will use is, well, the church is the hospital, and the hospital take in sick people. But as you heard me say before, what doctor receives a sick person that don't want to get well? Hospital is for healing the sick, not for storing them there and keeping them sick and keeping them there. You're right. The hospital is for sick people, for people that want to get well, for people that want to be better. And so the church is designed to heal those that are sin sick, not to keep them living in their sins and make them feel comfortable and accept their lifestyle that's contrary to the word. So no, we don't accept that excuse. You see that? We don't accept that excuse. And so God's love doesn't do that either. And people have asked me over the years, how can a loving God create a hell and then send people there? So, of course, we have to correct that. Number one, God does not send anybody to hell. people decide themselves to go there. Number two, God, the Bible makes it clear, God did not create hell for people. It was made for the devil and his angels. Number three, God allows people to go to hell because he loves his people so much, he don't want his people having to deal with the devil in heaven. So ultimately, it's your choice. God allows his people to go through things in this world we're not going to have to go through in the afterlife. Right now, we're putting up with the devil and all of his demons and the people that he's using. That's where God's love is. You see that? That's where his love is. His love is there to wake people up every day. People that don't believe he exists, people that know he exists and still reject him, his love wakes them up every single day and gives them another chance. So you can't look at your problems, and even believers say that, even so-called believers say that, well, where's God when, I'm going through this, and where was God when doing that? And you just don't know how much God is really guarding you. There's sometimes I'm driving. Even just yesterday, I was driving and I was in this curve. Driving in this, like real steep curve or whatever. And I thought, Lord, you're so gracious and merciful. Because at any moment you could snap your finger and my life can change for the worse. I could be driving through this curve and somebody can be coming from the opposite direction. And even though I'm in my lane, they can strike me, kill me, handicap me, do all kind of things. But you have kept me through every curve that I've driven through. That's God's love. That's God's love. So I look at those things like that, how, you read about it all the time and see it in the news all the time. People's lives change. And even when those things happen, you still have to look at the grace of God. Look at how long he keeps people. Look at how merciful he is. Just last night, just yesterday, we saw in the news where a teacher from Louisiana had drowned. And I don't know how far out he was when he drowned, but some kind of way he washed up on the beach in Florida. I guess him and his family were out there vacationing, and he washed up on the beach at the feet of two doctors from right here in Nashville. One of them an RN, or a trauma. Both of them involved in trauma. One of them was a surgeon, a trauma surgeon. Right there at their feet, he washed up. You see the mercy of God. And I love that it was a husband and wife who were vacationing down there, celebrating, I think, 30 years. And I loved how she said, we prayed for them. Not only were they doing, CPR, but they were praying for them. She had to put that in, and I'm glad she did that. Because they don't need to think that it was anybody but God. I'm talking about the folks that were listening in and watching that. They need to know who was responsible. CPR may have helped save his life, but CPR didn't have anything to do with him washing up at their feet. And so God shows us himself all of the time, and if we're not careful, we'll overlook it because all we're seeing is the bad. God, where are you when all these children are being shot innocently in drive-bys? And people get a tainted idea of love. I'm telling you, even when God takes people's life at times, he does that out of love. Now, already it's set that we have a set time that we're going to live. That's already set in stone, you see that? And that's not going to change. But I'm going to tell you, over the years, God have made it clear to me that sometimes he'll take people to keep them from backsliding because he knows what's going to happen down the road. And he'll take them at the moment they've committed their life before the devil get to them and cause them to backslide and lose their soul. Some people have left here early because God knew what was in their future, and he knew the devil's going to come and tempt them. They're going to fall for that temptation, and then the devil's going to take their life and cause them to spend an eternity in hell. So before that happened, I'll take them. That has happened. See God's love there? And then God have taken people who he knew was going to spend an eternity away from him, but to keep them from dragging other people with them. Ultimately, everything God does, love is at the base of it. Everything that he does, love is at the base of it. And see, when we understand that love, when we understand the love of God in that way, that's when we love our neighbor. Now, that's what makes it important. See, we have to understand God's love if we're gonna love our neighbor properly. You have to show God's love towards your neighbor. But see, human love is, as long as you're doing something for me, or as long as I'm benefiting from you some kind of way, then I'll show you love. See, human love look at what's right in front of them. God's love look at the big picture and the whole picture. That's what makes it easier not only to love our neighbors, but to love our enemies. You see that? That's what makes that easy, because we look at the big picture. And so if we're going to continue to love our neighbor, let's understand how God loves us, his creation. God is not as concerned about you having your way and you being happy as he is about you doing his will and finding happiness in his will. Other than that, you're just like a child that feel like, oh, I got good parents because my parents do this for me. They let me hang out all night. They let me drive even though I don't have a license. They let me do, that's not a good parent. Now, to a child's mind, that's a good parent. But ultimately, a parent that loves you is going to give you structure. They're going to raise you to be law-abiding citizens. They're going to prepare you for the world. My children will tell you, there are times they come and ask me for things, and I'll just flat out say no. Not because I don't have the power to give it to you, not because I don't want you to have it, but sometimes you just need to hear no, because when you get out in the real world, you're going to hear no for absolutely no reason. You're going to apply for a job, and the answer is going to be no. Not because we don't like you, but just because we've chose somebody else. And you have to raise children to learn to not take things personal. See, that's what love does. God prepares us to come against the wiles and the snares of the enemy. And it's unfortunate that the church is full of brats that can't stand an attack of the devil because they have not been challenged in any way. When you see basketball teams and football teams win championships, when you see football teams win the Super Bowl and all of these things, those teams were prepared for their opponents. That's why they won. They were properly prepared. And if you ever watch them in practice, or if you've ever played a sport, you know how grueling it can be in practice. You know that coach pushes you, and if you're not careful, you can think, man, this coach really got it in for me. When in reality, they're just preparing you for your opponent. And that's what God love does for us. He prepares us for our opponent. It may not be comfortable. It may not be easy to go through. It may feel like at sometimes we're going to break. But you know what? God knows just how far to stretch us before we break. He knows just how to prepare us for our opponent, because in reality, he's the one that created our opponent. He created that opponent. And therefore, he knows how to prepare us for it. And how does he do it? With love. And so if we're going to love our neighbor, we need to have the same mind that God has. And I'm telling you, sometimes, that means allowing people to go through. Not bailing them out every time they find themselves in a bad situation. I see a lot of handicapped grown people because every time you turn around, mom and daddy was bailing them out of situations. My children, some of them, they had homework, and if you let them, they let you do your homework, their homework for them. And I've let them all. I'm not going to do your homework. And I'm not going to go through it A to Z with you. You sit in class, you need to be sitting there listening. Now, if you genuinely don't understand something, I will help you, but I'm not going to do it for you. I can promise you that. That's the way God is. That's the way God is. And what is it? His love for us. His love for us prepares us, and we have to love our neighbor the same way God loves us. See the big picture. Amen. So we want to say thank you all for joining us today. We pray that something have been said that have been a blessing to you, and we look forward to bringing you more of these daily word devotions. Have a blessed day.